What was your most disappointing "this is not what I expected" moment after being hyped for something? Best friend said she had exciting news for me and our other best friend wants to meet up. I'm thinking pregnancy or engagement. Pyramid scheme. People who do that deserve whatever rudeness you care to heap upon their heads. In a tubing down the Delaware River, they said the water was moving pretty good. They said they had plenty of rain upstream. Got there, they drop us off with tubes and life jackets. The water was 1 foot deep, barely moving, and to boot the wind was blowing us upstream. We wound up walking the 5 miles downstream because it's too shallow to float. The 10 of us demanded a refund and got it. What a waste of a day. Mine involves water too. I was in Denmark, and my friend took me on a boat ride in a fjord. I had traveled to Norway many times before going to Denmark, so when we were in the boat I kept waiting till we got to the fjord. Turns out we were in the fjord the whole time. It's just that the ones in Denmark suck. When I was young, Puffin cereal had a promotion where you could adopt a puffin. I got excited and asked my dad if we could do it, and he said yes. I was so excited, I asked him what puffins eat, because we needed to start preparing for our new friend. That's when he informed me you just gave money to a charity, and they counted that as adopting a puffin. I learned loss at a young age. I can completely relate to that feeling. The way people phrase things sometimes, man. When I was in 6th grade, 1996, we had a little fundraiser to collect money for the school. First prize won a Game Boy. I handed my mom to help me sell as many magazine subscriptions as I could. Actually won. And I received a Game Boy-like device with the capability to play one game. Basically the modern equivalent of getting a cell phone that can download one app. You got stiffed, man. Your school pretty much tricked you into helping them make a profit. You were better off buying a legit Game Boy than what they gave you. When I was a little kid, ABC's Wide World of Sports was a Sunday afternoon program that was several hours long. I happened to catch the start of it one Sunday, and they announced that one of the events on that day's program was the Flamingo Stakes, one of the greatest spectacles in racing. I sat through the whole show because I thought they were going to be racing flamingos. Nope, just dumb old horses. Flamingo racing sounds better. When I was 12 I was in Mexico for Cinco de Mayo. Was pretty disappointed when I found out nobody gave a crap except Americans, lol. Cinco de Mayo isn't a huge holiday in Mexico. I like to think of it as the Mexican version of St. Patrick's Day, another day for Americans to get drunk and feel slightly cultured. The 16th of September, however, is Mexico's Independence Day, so that's a Mexican holiday worth visiting Mexico for. When I was a child, Kraft had this promotion going on with their mac and cheese that if you collected a couple things, maybe like parts of the box with a picture on them or something, I don't really remember, and then sent them in, you'd get a little toy train in return. This was right around the release of the Polar Express, so it was a little model of the engine. Now, being the child I was, I didn't realize it was going to be just a little toy. I thought it was going to be at least big enough for me to ride on. But to my dismay, it came in a tiny little box. My mom opened it up, and I started crying. All of my hopes and dreams had been crushed. I still have the train. It sits on the top of my bookcase because at this point I honestly can't give it or throw it away. Going up the Empire State Building. It was $50. We waited 2 hours. All of the staff were incredibly rude, and then when we finally got to the top, it was so cloudy you couldn't see the ground or anything else around the building, not even the next block over. The good news is, we have hilarious miserable pictures to commemorate the experience. So I'm Indian, but I hated Indian food as a kid. Once when I was around 11, my mom promised that if I finished all my dal, which, of all Indian food, was my arch nemesis, she would take me to see a movie. Now I rarely got to see movies, so that was a treat. Would she take me to see Sky High? The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? I was so pumped and managed to scarf down the entire bowl in like 3 minutes flat. She took me to see March of the Penguins. I'm sure it's a great documentary, but when you're an 11-year-old kid pumped for a fun blockbuster, watching penguins huddling for 2 hours is a major letdown. That sucks. That is a very sneaky track. Though I have developed a love for several Indian dishes this year after moving to an area with a huge Indian population and being exposed to new recipes. Dal however is kinda manky, too mushy for me. I was very young, sitting at home playing with toys or whatnot. My dad comes in the house grinning like an idiot, all excited and everything. He tells me he has something for me in a very unusual bubbly happy way. Little me is intrigued. I ask what it is and he tells me I have to guess. I ask if he got me a new toy. Number. I ask if he got me a new video game. Number. I ask if he got me a pet. Number. Little me pauses to consider, trying to decipher the look of joy on my old man's face. I got it. I'm excited. Are we going to Disney World? Dad's face suddenly became nervous, like he just realized that this might not have been the best way to do things. Tells me it isn't Disney. Pulls out a plastic bag from behind his back and tells me to hold out my hands. I do so. He drops a chocolate bar in my little palms. I stare at it flabbergasted for a moment. I say thank you and give him a hug. We both walked away in complete letdown of what we expected. I don't think this was the first time this sort of parent-child exchange happened. I think if your dad had just said look what I got you and shown you the candy bar, you would have been more excited for it. Comic-Con. I really wanted to love it. I was so excited, but I just didn't enjoy it. I won't be back, but I'm glad others get to enjoy it. You pay money to enter a convention where everything costs more money. When Beetlejuice was in the theater, there was a promotion at a local cinema for saying Beetlejuice would be there. I was so excited that Michael Keaton would be in our small town. I begged my dad to take me so we could meet him. This was no small effort on my part because my father was not a nice man and I didn't like being around him. He agreed, and when we got there I almost started crying. Instead of Michael Keaton there was a young teenage girl in a striped suit, poor runny makeup and a crooked wig taking tickets. I try not to get my hopes up anymore. Cringe-shinabon. Not as awesome as I was told it would be. Granted, it was cringe-shinabon that told me how awesome it would be. Isn't that a new cringe or melon flavored offering from Cinnabon? Conversely, as a fresh graduate and persistently being told horror stories about adulthood, being a working adult hasn't been as awful as I've been told it would. Ditto. I found education much more challenging because it wasn't as goal-oriented as making money. It's not serious, but buying Elder Scrolls Online. I thought it was gonna be like Skyrim but online. Nope, just a lame MMO. I think what people want is Skyrim, with friends. Have a 2-3 man squad and go around cleaning out massive dungeons and ruins. Slay huge dragons and explore. Watch Dogs. So much hype behind it. Was excited for years. Went to a midnight release only to play it for 3 hours and never again. I know it's an unpopular opinion, but I love Watch Dogs. I didn't keep up with the hype at first and then played it for what it is. I loved the story and I thought the hacking aspect was pretty novel. I now can't wait for the sequel, and I do hope they fix the issues so more people can enjoy the series. When I was very young my great-grandmother died. My very Catholic relatives explained that we were going to something called a wake, which would be our last chance to say goodbye to her before she goes to heaven forever. They made it sound like she would actually be awake, and since they were constantly telling me about miracles I didn't find that odd. A few hours and one funeral home later and I became just a bit disillusioned with religion. This is very sad. To play devil's advocate, explaining death to a child is very difficult already. Not necessarily the fault of religion, although the concepts of heaven and in some cases, heck, make the topic of death 10x more confusing for naive children. It only lasted for a few hours, but when my wife and I arrived in Paris via Gare du Nord, freaking sketchy people everywhere, freaking trash everywhere, freaking smell of rank pee, freaking terrible introduction to a city. We just arrived via train from Brussels, which we loved, but apparently a lot of people online said it's boring, overrated, I dunno, and getting off the train to Paris ended up being a major letdown. As stated above, it only lasted a few hours. We ended up loving Paris and I hope to get back someday. Gonna show some age here. Mad balls. I remember commercial after commercial of living, talking, balls with attitudes. They were foam. Just foam. The Eastern State Penitentiary Halloween attraction in Philadelphia. I was so hyped to go around 10 years ago. I heard so many stories about how scary it was supposed to be and that there were tiers of scariness where you could drop out at any time if you couldn't handle it, and that people would be separated from the group, etc. It was around $20 to get into. In reality it only took about a half hour to get through, which is how long the line was as well. Nothing special, just people dressed up like monsters and a part where you had to put on 3D glasses. When we came out at the end I could have sworn it was just the end of the first part. Nope. Huge disappointment for 15-year-old me. There's simply too many people let in at once, so you all just walk in a slow line and see all the jump scares well in advance. Nothing is scary. The workers seem bored out of their mind and there's too much of the crappy wear 3D glasses and look at our cheesy neon paint effect. I was there 5 years ago and it's just terrible. Frozen. I waited until it was out on DVD to watch it. I was expecting it to be the best Disney movie ever since it was so hyped up. I think Tangled was by far a better movie. Meeting Cholera Burst. It was after a show in Indianapolis last year. He clearly didn't want to talk to anyone who waited outside to meet him. He was nice enough to sign some of my records, but he kind of treated it like a hassle. IDK, just listening to any Bright Eyes song makes me think that he'd be a really distant person. I'm sure there are lots of video games that rank higher than this, but Star Wars The Force Unleashed. Don't get me wrong, I love the story, but the gameplay was supposed to be the second coming of Jedi Knight 2 and it was just so buggy and bad. To be fair, I blame video game sites and news networks for overhyping it, especially G4. I don't blame Adam Sessler or Morgan Webb because they were following corporate dialogue. But the amount of hype and this is going to be great they kept advertising was disgusting when release day came and Blair freaking Herter has to be the one to tell us yay, it's a 2/5 and nothing was said about it again. The only other game that stands out would be Brutal Legend, but SWTF you took the cake on overhype. I really enjoyed the first one, loved the fights and powers and customization, and the endings were great. Only thing that really annoyed me was playing back over the same levels later in the game. Force Unleashed 2 however, sucked. The Sims 4. I was promised more extensive emotions and instead I got badly portrayed bipolar caricatures with bright colors. We made it better quick, Steve, up the saturation. There was a new product still in development that was being hyped as a transparent super hydrophobic and oleophobic coating called Never Wet that would cause water to shed off of nearly any surface, rendering anything from clothing to circuit boards and electronic devices impermeable to water, dirt and grease, emerging clean and dry after being immersed or splattered. It remained as a future possibility for years before a product was finally introduced to the market, as a Rust-Oleum branded system of 2 spray-on layers. I was one of the first people in my area to buy it, and the first at my particular Home Depot store. I had to explain to them what it was, and why I wanted them to break open the pallet and sell me one. Turns out, the product ended up being not at all like the early promotional videos, which had disappeared at that point, replaced with videos about the final product. It was not very oleophobic, only hydrophobic. It was not transparent, but appeared on the surface as a very visible cloudy white coating. It was not durable, and could be easily rubbed off even after fully curing. Even minimally rubbed or braided away, it would lose much of its hydrophobic quality, totally unusable for clothing. And it came with warnings against using it as a conformal coat for circuit boards and electronics. One of the promoted uses according to the early videos. Wouldn't have been quite so upset about it, except it was also plenty expensive. Something like $30 if I recall correctly. I still have the cans, and I have yet to figure out anything it would actually be useful for, given the narrow circumstances in which it's ended up being effective. Honestly, the souks, markets, in Marrakech, everyone I spoke to made them out to be a fascinating labyrinth of sights, sounds and smells that you can wander around all day, which is true, to an extent. But no one told me that they aren't pedestrianized, meaning mopeds use them as miniature highways. No one told me about the people that give you the wrong directions on purpose, and then ask for money to show you the right way. Someone tried this about once every 15 minutes. No one told me that I'd be constantly hassled, to the point of harassment, to buy some crappy leather slippers or some overpriced argan oil. I dunno. I loved them in the morning when they were quiet and you could actually spend some time looking at the stuff on sale. But once they got busy, they definitely weren't for me. Do you remember those fundraisers in grade school? Yeah, frick those. And whichever class sells the most will get an ice cream party. You mean where they march us all down to the cafeteria, give us each one of those pre-packed cups and then we just kind of sit there for a bit. Even worse, the winners next year really did get a party in their classroom. I know because I walked by and saw it on my way to the bathroom. I was already well aware that adults could be buttholes to kids, but that whole deal made my blood boil. My first time smoking weed. Didn't really feel anything besides making me feel tired. My friends are talking about getting edibles saying those will really do the trick but I DK. In first grade, my mother had informed me that we were getting a new addition to the family. I don't know why, but I assumed that I was getting a brother through adoption. It got to the point that I would tell people about it, and in school I drew a picture of me sharing my room and playing basketball with my new brother. My teacher actually became quite concerned because I was so psyched, so she informed my mother to affirm the idea and offer congratulations. With this, my mother told her this wasn't the case and they both thought it was hilarious, as we were getting a family dog. However, I wasn't informed of this until we drove to pick up the dog. The entire car ride there, I assumed we were going to pick up my brother, until out walks my mom holding a puppy. Weirdest part of the whole thing. The second I saw the dog, I forgot all about my new brother. Sorry, imaginary adopted brother, but dogs are the crap. I can't be the only one who stuck around and watched the live stream of Kanye's famous video drop and just went what the frick audibly. When I was younger I ordered a pair of Jordans online and I couldn't wait to rock them at school. The day it was supposed to arrive, it didn't and I was heartbroken. But it arrived the next day and I put them on and felt the exact same. Since then, I haven't really cared much for basketball shoes. At Lowlands Festival a few years ago, in my drugged up haze I got really psyched to see Junior Senior so I could bop along to Move Your Feet. Set started and it didn't seem right. Figured they were playing some new stuff and would crack out that tune at the end. Waited, getting more and more excited. They never played it. I was watching Dinosaur Jr. Man, I wouldn't even be upset. I'd love to see Dinosaur Jr. The Grand Canyon. For the first 20 minutes you're simply awestruck gazing into this beautiful majestically massive empty space where Earth should be. The next 20 minutes is trying to figure out what do for lunch. That was actually my first experience. I went back last year and spent the whole day driving the South Rim, stopping at every possible lookout. It really is beautiful and worth a visit. It's also somewhat terrifying watching people hold their kids on the other side of the safety rail so they can get the perfect picture. Jesus. People. Fallout freaking 4. So many expectations. I have put a ton of time into it but can't get myself to finish it. I always end up kinda bored or disappointed. I'm on PC so I can kinda mod away my disappointment to an extent but it's just not the same. I remember being enamored with FO3 and New Vegas. Skyrim absolutely blew me away and Oblivion was even better. FO4 lacks soul and uniqueness. It's one wave of raiders, super mutants, gunners, whatever. The legendary drops are just average pieces of gear with a small modifier. And the freaking dialogue, the DLCs are quite fun and take the game into a little better direction, but honestly, I've moved on. New Vegas is the best 3D Fallout, hands down. The movie Atonement. It was marketed as Oscar-worthy period romance piece. The Next English Patient turns into rape revenge tragedy. Not the best early date movie I was hoping for. Marine Corps Boot Camp. I had no idea what I was in for. Within 5 minutes, I saw what my head looked like without my hair, and I can only describe the experience as stunning. Definitely culture shock to be sure. Luther Sandwich. Fried chicken breast in between a sliced donut, topped with bacon and maple syrup. Sounded like the best thing ever, but was actually quite awful. At least I felt like a free American while eating it, I guess. To me, that sounds awful to begin with. My digestive tract is cringing. I was on vacation with my wife and kids. She normally does the whole trip itinerary, but she was in and out of the hospital for a few months before the trip and I decided I'd try and take charge of the vacation. We had a beautiful trip planned out to Costa Rica, with scuba diving, forest canopy tours, and we were even staying at a resort with a water park and an arcade for the kids. But since my wife had been struggling the last few months, I decided I'd plan out something special for her and me. I saw this website online advertising a romantic horseback ride on the beach. They'd give you the horses, a guide would lead you a few feet ahead, and you'd have a few hours on the beach to enjoy the sights without having to walk. We left the kids alone at the hotel. The eldest was 16 and fairly responsible, and drove the half hour to the address the site gave. I sensed something was wrong immediately. The signs were all very old, outdated, and they were clearly poorly maintained. I made the call to turn around and get the heck out of the place, and we saw later that week on the news we made the right decision. It turns out the ride was only an hour long, as opposed to the 3-hour trip the website advertised. Background: a few years ago I spent a couple weeks in Nepal. The journey home went Kathmandu, Nepal, Bangkok, Thailand, London, Chicago, home. The Bangkok, London leg of the trip was an overnight flight. As we are flying over Europe, I was awakened from the dazed stupor that for some reason on airplanes is referred to as sleep by the most wonderful of smells: cooking bacon. After 2 weeks of a near-vegetarian existence in a predominantly Hindu country, the sweet savory aroma smelled like absolute heaven to this omnivore. The stewardess went down the aisles of the plane asking if we would prefer sausage or bacon with our breakfast. I, of course, excitedly replied bacon. Shortly thereafter they brought us our food. My internal reaction was something like the following: what's this? This isn't bacon. This is warm ham. Where's the crispy strips of deliciousness? It was only then that I realized my error. The airline I was traveling on was British Airways, and what I took for ham was in fact English bacon. When I was a kid, my mom took me to meet family in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. Most of the area didn't even have electricity, and the whole time was spent with 90-year-old relatives. The whole time my mom promised to take us to this theme park on our last day. We'd go to this park and discover this amazing theme park had one coaster, and it was broken down that day. Driving a Porsche 911 GT3 at a track in Vegas. Went with friends for a UFC show, but since I'm not a huge fight fan, my big spend was driving a sweet car. The place was a freaking gong show. The GT3 and turbo were broken and I had to wait more than 3 hours to drive a Cayman for about 6 minutes, in the dark, and their track lighting was also broken. And they overcrowded the track with faster cars, so every 10 seconds the ride-along instructor hit the brakes and grabbed the wheel to let someone pass. A total waste of time and money. The Native American shooting the star on Tootsie Roll Pop suckers is not something you collect to get free Tootsie Roll Pops. Probably not my most disappointing, but childbirth. I was so excited to experience this moment of meeting the baby I'd been loving and dreaming of. Complicated labor involving Bell's palsy and meconium that was 16+ hours and ended with an emergency cesarean. Spinal block went too far. I panicked because I couldn't feel my lungs and felt like I was dying. Then the baby came out. Never saw it because it had to be whisked away because it nearly died. Baby lived. I lived. But I had PTSD and PPD once the baby came home from the NICU. A Weezer concert. I wanted so bad for it to be good. Pinkerton didn't have any emotion and he looked so burned out. Every member of the band just stood there and played. They didn't move the spot they were standing in. Guild Wars 2. It wasn't a bad game per se, but it was very different from the original and I just couldn't get into it. The 5 years of hype I had built around it also probably didn't help. Went to Crockwini Roast this year. Was so hyped to see Red Hot Chili Peppers live. They are one of my favorite bands. The tickets sold out, so I coughed up the $400 for 2 tickets that were actually seats, but about as high up as it gets without being in the lawn. Honestly considered dropping $1K on better seats. Glad I didn't. It's hard to be mad at them. Medical emergency is medical emergency, but I was super freaking bummed when Flea came out and said Anthony Kiedis was on his way to the hospital and they couldn't perform. Can't be mad at them, but frick, that disappointment was heavy. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.